These lessons are not to be held in isolation. I want you to learn these lessons too, if you want. And to kind of explain my reasoning for going to India, as a child, I had held in mind I always wanted to visit these far-off places. Used to sing that song, "Faraway places with strange-sounding names are calling, calling me." Anyone remember that? Oh, are you all younger than I am? I think so. I really wanted to have this time of spiritual renewal. And I also wanted to see how the sacred is interwoven in life in India, and how the sacredness is carried through and explored more in terms of Eastern mysticism influencing our unity movement. So I had many different reasons for going, but the one thing that I'm convinced of now, and really I sorted this through when I returned from the trip, is that unity is a movement that is built on this underground stream of truth that has its roots in the Hindu faith, in Buddhism, in Chinese philosophy, and Egyptian pharaohs, and Greek understandings, and other traditions. And that we in unity are at this end of it in evolution, coming to this place where we can be seen as a large umbrella embracing the wisdom practices of every faith tradition. Doesn't that feel amazing? Many of us have been taught or have thought that the unity movement or New Thought movement started in the New England states with Phineas Quimby, with the Transcendentalists, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and that we are a new movement and that we have all these new thoughts. But you see, we don't really have new thoughts. We have taken our thoughts of old, ancient ways and faith traditions, and we are putting new thoughts around them in order to understand God in our lives. Okay? Everyone understand that? So that we tend to see ourselves as being a very, very young group, and we are. 1890s, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore began this movement we call unity. But it's a little bit more than that. There's a unity Hindu expert. His name is Reverend Dr. Paul Laughlin. And he says this, that new thought, the thoughts that we have now around God and our divinity within and the universal laws of the universe, all of them are based on Eastern mysticism. And they came to us through the Transcendentalists in New England. And because they studied this Eastern mysticism, and other yogis and others have traveled to the West and shared their wisdom with us, we now have a great deal of information about the East, about spiritual practices. By 1880, Warren Felt Evans, a unity minister, began studying this Eastern mysticism. And, Warren Felt Evans, no, he was a New Thought leader. I don't think he was affiliated with unity because it was Charles Fillmore that really began the idea and the concept of unity. But in the 1890s, Charles Fillmore was writing about Eastern mysticism. He was publishing and writing articles and incorporating these understandings of these ancient practices. So we are standing on the shoulders of the entire world wisdom on this planet. And it really makes me think about the differences, the different words that are used, the different ways that God is perceived, the variations of God. It's very humbling in a way to think that every culture has really tried their best to put God into their vocabulary and to worship from that place. Now, Hinduism, it's the most prominent religion in India. There are over 330 million gods and goddesses in India. Hinduism is over 5,000 to 6,000 years old, and because of that, it's really prominent, very prominent, many, many temples in India. And I think there are three prominent traditions that I've learned of. You may know of more, but one is Vaishnavism, the other is Shaivism, and the third one is Shaktism. And because of that, each tradition has its way of perceiving God and worshiping in that tradition. But each one in India, each home, each person, seems to have their own altar area, their own ability to have a puja, a worship moment, before they leave the house, before they go off on their daily activities. Perhaps there's a flower, perhaps there's food, an offering, perhaps there is some deity that's being spoken to. But that moment of connecting with one's spiritual life is done in the home. On Sundays, they do not go to church. There would be no service to go to. They go during the week. If there's a temple that they're near, they go into the temple, they feel the energies, and they are having their worship moments there. And then they go back home again. I did notice, too, in India, there are many pilgrimages that are taken. Many of them are with groups that walk on the street for days in order to get to the next temple. It's quite extraordinary that their spiritual lives are so filled with intentions to worship and to experience God in many different ways. What we know about Shaivism, the worship of Shiva, is that it is this non-dual understanding of God. In other words, there is the oneness that we talk of in unity, no separation. Spirit is truth. Man is spiritual in nature. These are things we talk about here. And so you can hear the roots going back into the Hindu faith. So my own personal journey was to fly from Richmond to New York, and then a 15-hour flight from New York into Mumbai, India. Now, if anybody has flown 15 hours on an airplane, you know what I'm talking about. It is a spiritual practice where God, please get me there. So the moment is also one where you arrive and perhaps rested or not rested. It does take its toll. So we land into Mumbai. We're picked up by a caravan taken to a village called Ganeshpuri, which is about 2.5 hours away. And so ending up there around 1:30 in the morning, and the expectation of the yoga retreat is that we get up at 3:30 and be at temple at 4:10. And this was every day. So it took several days before the rest came in and my ability to change my sleep patterns kicked in. But it was absolutely a marvelous retreat in that the village was one of pure devotion to two gurus, Nityananda and Muktananda. Many of you may have heard of either one of those. The villagers seemed to stay there in the village for a purpose, to worship in the temple and worship these particular gurus, and thus worship themselves. So, again, the understanding of God and God within permeates the entire village. And the songs that were being sung in the village were many of them were spiritual songs that I heard in the temple themselves. So it was quite an experience to be immersed in such a place. So my first lesson, and this was shared wisdom throughout the yoga retreat, planning is priceless and plans are useless. Because I had planned on going to this yoga retreat. I had planned on just laying out on these wonderful, comfortable blankets and submerge myself in just bliss for hours. And that is not the rhythm of the retreat. The rhythm of the retreat is quite energetic, and there are moments of stillness and moments of meditation, but quite an experience to keep up with. So my practice was to let go what I thought was going to happen and just enter into the rhythm. And when I began to do that, I began to be more spiritually awake. I began to be in touch more with my true self. I was not concerned with what others were saying or doing. I was showing up when it was time. And I began to see that I was really connecting at a deeper level with God. Quite a wonderful experience. Now, you don't need to go to India to do that, do you? We can do that here. But if we're looking at the slides, let's look at the first one. Outside my room, where I stayed for these 12 days, was a rice mandala of the Om. Now, the Om is just universal language of Sanskrit. It is the breath of God. It is that which emanates from the throat and connects our heart and our head when we say it. Om. We're going to chant it in a few moments. And the Om symbol has stayed with me because it just reminds me of the energy of God. And that energy of God is like being in the flow, the sound, the silence, the cosmic all that there is, and realize, as the Hebrew psalmist said, be still and know that I am God. That is how I connected with the Om. Meister Eckhart said it in a different way. Meister Eckhart is the father of German philosophy and religion. And he said, just let God be God in you. Permission to relax, to be in that place, for God's everywhere. So one day I was in a shop, and a man that I finally recognized was a holy man dressed in white and very kind, looked at me when I was buying this symbol of the Om. And he said to me, no Hindu, no Christian, only Om. What a conversation. The best one I had. And so we're going to sing now and chant together Om Namah Shivaya. And let me just talk you through it, because this Om is the sound of creation that's coming through us, God moving through us, and it is uniting us totally, head and heart. And then we say Namah, and Namah means I'm just going to look within and recognize my own divinity. So Om Namah, and then Shiva, Shiva being God, all there is, absolute reality, and then Yah. That absolute reality is also here. Isn't that gorgeous? So we're going to chant these Sanskrit words, sing along, catch up, and just sing as you feel like you are included in this. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Now we're going to mix it up just a little bit here. Shivaya Namaha Shivaya Om Shivaya Shiva Yam.
The top.
Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shivaya Namaha. Shivaya. Shivaya Namaha. Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah That was beautiful. Really love that. So now I want to show you another slide so we can still stay in the Om. And this is a slide from a fire ceremony done with a Brahmin priest, with 7 Brahmin priests. This too is made of rice. This depicts the God in the center moving out through the planets and the galaxies in this place of universal law, expansion and contraction. Everything goes into God, everything comes back out to God. And isn't it amazing how a mandala can say all that in just a depiction, just through the symbols? It's quite wonderful. That is also on the ceiling of one of the places that I visited. And so this particular experience with the Brahmin priest was quite wonderful. Let's go to the next slide of the setup. There's a little fire ceremony, not just a fire ceremony, but a Vedic fire ceremony that is set up in a ceremonial form with about 4 priests on one side and 3 on the other, and they chant for 8 hours. They chant the history of the world, all that they know, that their understanding of God, over 100 names of God. They chant about astronomical sightings. They chant all their history. And that's the abbreviated version that they gave us. But at the yoga retreat that I attended, it was quite wonderful for it to be done all day in Sanskrit and to feel like you still knew that you were a part of it. Quite a great experience. Because all they were doing was calling forth that cosmic power that we call principle, that we call God here in the West. And then they demonstrated a way to say we can always connect with that eternal flame without a match. They had a little pulley, and they were able to ignite a fire. And at that ceremony, it was such a blessing. The moment that fire was lit, it was as if we could have been alive 25,000 years ago and experienced the same moment. Replicates in the macrocosm as the Big Bang. It is that moment of connection with all creation. I was so grateful one Brahmin priest was so gracious to us. He said, I'm going to give you an acronym for God to understand the threefold reality of Hinduism. That G in God is the generative power, and that is Brahma, source and creator. O is the operative power of Vishnu, of growth and of sustainment and nurturance. And D in God is the dissolving power, the destructing power of Shiva to free our limitations and our ego. Just an amazing moment. Those were the only words spoken in English. The rest was done in Sanskrit. Quite an amazing moment. So I want to show you now one of the gods that is, you could say, the best loved god in India, and this is Ganesha. Ganesh is an elephant deity. He is the son of Shiva. He lost his head. It was replaced by an elephant head, the body of a human, but with extra hands. Ganesh is holding his broken trunk over one arm. And the way this deity is worshipped is that he represents breaking through any obstacle in your life that would keep you from achieving prosperity and success. That image is over the door of lots of different temples, over homes. It's seen on altars. I took 3 myself to Brahmin priests, and they were blessed. Richard was blessed 3 times. So just know that the experience is one where you feel that energy, that elephant energy that would go through a jungle and just thrash through and move through any obstacle. But that's what we do in consciousness. And so the Hindu faith is very much based on that consciousness and how we operate in our daily lives. Now, I learned a lesson also in India about obstacles. I was experiencing something that Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body. Anyone ever felt aches and pains and worries and stresses? Well, I was having somewhat of a sensory overload with all the sights and the smells and the sounds and the transportation and the money exchange and going into unknown temples and worshiping different deities, and I was very overloaded. Enjoying it all, but still overloaded. We arrived in a city called Varanasi, and I looked down at the 65 steps to go down to the Ganges River, and I took several steps, and my ankle must have been tight because I sprained it. And so I had several days of coming into that place where I could just heal, but then go through my new experiences more relaxed. So my body didn't tense up and I didn't strain any part of it. That was a true lesson for me. And there were other things that I experienced, breathing exercises, using my breath to reduce any stress, and simply to just be in the moment by being conscious of my spiritual self observing the external world. When I went there, I was witnessing, my I am was witnessing the moment, and I was at peace. Great lesson for me. So back to Ganesh. This was a picture taken at another ashram that I visited, and this ashram helped women develop a co-op where they could make and sell wares in the village, and I was able to purchase small items, and bring them home to the grandchildren. And truly, there was just such joy in connecting with the villagers over what they made. It's in the one-on-one transactions that you feel the energy. So let's go to the next slide. So traveling to Varanasi. It's on the Ganges River. It's a holy city. So It is Jerusalem and it's Mecca. It is that holy place to all Hindus. On the ghats, which are those steps leading down to a platform where you may walk next to the river, it's estimated that over 60,000 people walk it every day. It is so popular that you see every faith tradition is represented there. And they come to worship, and they come to meditate, and they may even go into the Ganges River for purification rites. It is said that if you just submerge yourself 3 times, that you are healed of your karma. So know that in this city for 5,000 years, people have been coming there, experiencing the same rituals, the same rites, speaking the same language, reciting the same prayers, going to the same temples in that city. And in Varanasi, the city is dedicated primarily to Lord Shiva. This particular god is the god of destruction, the god that will dissolve evils, the god that will put you in a place of letting go in order to create new life. And so this god is one highly revered, highly loved and worshiped. And so there are just so many different forms that this god has taken. This particular one is the incarnation of Shiva coming to save the world again. He swallows poison and it stays in his throat, and his throat turns blue. And so you can see that he is well honored, well revered in this depiction of himself with his consort Parvati. Next slide would be the slide of Shiva. On the blue chair, Shiva is in the form of a rock formation, the male lingam, and sitting in the feminine yoni. And the depiction is all over temples in India. This masculine and feminine, the moment of creation, it's replicated in temples and adored, so that it's decorated with flowers and with garlands. And you can just see this white little figure in front is Nandi, the sacred cow that is always facing the lingam or Shiva. And the way it's explained is that through this natural form, it is the formless coming into form. It is that moment where we call it in unity manifestation. And so the last slide I want to show you is of this sacred cow. Now, in the village where I visited, Ganeshpuri, the cows just roam freely. They come up to you, they bless you, you bless them. And about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a group of them come and stand in front of Amul's ice cream parlor. And so we don't know what all that's about, but we do know this, that we have a great deal to learn from our Eastern brothers and sisters about how to care for animals. Eckhart Tolle in his book A New Earth says, underneath the surface appearance, everything is not only connected with everything else, but also with the source of life out of which it came. Even a stone, and more easily a flower or bird, dare we say even a sacred cow, that's my insertion, can show us the way back to God, to ourselves, and to Source. So not only do the livestock roam freely, so do the dogs, so do the chickens, fed by the townspeople. And it's just amazing. On one afternoon, a large cow had just fallen in the middle of a narrow street, and we were walking around it, and you could hear the death rattle, and you knew this that she was passing, and we just blessed it. And the loving energy that I felt surrounding that animal was unbelievable. It was something good for me to witness because I had never been around an animal that was dying. Not a cow, not a huge cow. Anyway, I did witness the cremation ceremonies on the Ghats of the Ganga, but I did not witness suffering. Howard Caesar, who is a unity minister in Houston, Texas, who's been attending the Oneness University in India, says all movement away from the what is suffering. And he says that non-acceptance and the battle to get away from what there is to be faced is most of one's suffering. So here we are. We're all spiritual travelers, aren't we? And we're in a culture that's moving away from religions, and we're moving towards spirituality. Up until the last years, unity has been a movement where we come in to heal. We come in to heal from relationships or our understanding or our misunderstanding of God. We come to heal our understanding of prosperity or to be accepted for our gender, for our sexuality, for our different understandings from traditional faith situations. And we have hung there for such a long time that we might be missing the boat unless we start getting a larger picture. Because after traveling to India, I began to see that we are a vehicle now to be a loving global example for spiritual sharing. And if we just begin to think in those terms of enlarging our understandings, how are we going to be? How do we wake up to what is ours to do? Well, one way is to really be in touch with modern science because we're in sync with them. And we're coming to understand this God of our understanding is what we're talking about in spiritual settings, same as happening in university settings and documents and research. We want to stay in touch with the teachings of other masters on the planet. We can learn from them. We want to stay in touch with the wisdom of all faith traditions, the wisdom of other faith traditions, and stay grounded in the consciousness of Jesus Christ. We want to be able to transcend ways that we feel fear when we hear a Sanskrit mantra. We want to transcend any fear, the separation from others, from the dress that they wear or the words that they say or how they call God. We want to help write new stories because the stories that are ingrained into many cultures now just continue to perpetuate the fear and sense of separation and the desire to retaliate. Perhaps we could write new stories to help broaden and expand our hearts, get us back to who we are. We want to make sure we make enlightened choices of what we do on this planet. And if we can begin to see ourselves differently, see ourselves as being culturally Christian and spiritually unlimited, then we come to that place where we are spiritually free. We are unlimited. And we can build bridges all over the world with other faiths. So on a micro level, you can say we've learned how to harness the Christ potential within us and to move it out and to heal our lives and to do what we need to do to be successful, prosperous, and happy on this planet. That's our birthright. But there is more to do when it comes to crossing religious lines. We just haven't learned how to do much of that. And perhaps if we just begin thinking of in terms of a global shared awakening, a shared awakening where the Christ in me sees it in another person in their faith tradition, and we cross that line with our heart, then we will be happier. There'll be less suffering, less pain, less ego differences, fighting, war. We can be it. And when we do, we can come to that experience, that devotion of God, and we can really say, there is no Hindu, there is no Christian, there is just the Om. I thank you, and I bless you.